Hello and welcome to episode number 45 of Behind the Impact. I'm your host, Jeremy Brown. In this episode, Aaliyah McCants, the Senior Director of Global Inclusion and Impact at Peloton, joins the show. Aaliyah, welcome to Behind the Impact.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. We have a lot to get into around Peloton and all the great work that you're doing there. But before we get into that, what I would really like to do is to go back in time and start from the very beginning in terms of your career and how you got into the world of social impact, which is a very interesting story. I think you don't have really a traditional approach or path to social impact. So let's get into that. Can you tell me that story?
No, although I don't know if there is such thing as a traditional path into this work. I think everyone kind of has their own journey into it, but mine started in the classroom. So I went to Spelman College. I did a lot of volunteering in local schools there, and I got very passionate about the idea of like education as a pathway to create the kind of world that I wanted to see. So after graduation, I was the first member of a new program called the Match Corps, which was at this like small then charter school in Boston. It was supposed to be a 1 year program. I ended up like falling in love with the school, falling in love with the kids and with the mission. And so I ended up staying into teaching and leadership positions for the next 7 years. And then at the end of those 7 years, I started to get a little bit antsy about like, well, what does it look like to do this at scale? You know, we were having like great outcomes for the few kids who were in our school, but how do we scale this? And so I went to business school. I came here to New York and attended Columbia. I interned at the Department of Education because I was like, what's the opposite of this like small, tiny one school in Boston, like the biggest school district like in the country. And I interned there, and I have so much respect for people who work in the government. They can have like huge change at scale, but it is government. And then I realized that working in a government setting wasn't for me. And so after graduation, I ended up at this great growing nonprofit organization called Relay, where I did pretty much everything, but it was basically like a strategy role, launching new functions, launching new programs, helping us launch new campuses. And I did that for almost 8 years. And in the time while I was at Relay, I became a Peloton member. So I joined the Peloton community in 2018 when my husband and I brought home a bike. And I just really fell in love with the brand and with the instructors and like the community around it. And the opportunity arose after Peloton made its pledge in 2020 to build out the social impact work. And a former colleague at Relay kind of knocked on my door and said, "Hey, would you want to consider building out our social impact work?" And I was just like, this is exactly what I want to do next. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years. And it's been quite the journey. But I think the through line between my career background that might be relevant for other people is just I have a pretty strong vision of the world that I like to see it. You know, it's a world that's more equitable, more just. And then the pathway to affect that has been, through nonprofits and through education and through government and now through corporate. But the world I'm trying to build has been pretty consistent throughout.
And when you joined Peloton, that was your first opportunity to do impact work in a corporation, correct?
It was, yeah, it has been. It's been an interesting journey, an interesting ride, not pun not intended.
Take me back to that time when you first joined Peloton and you had the responsibility of building out the impact program and all, really focusing on the pledge work as well. Where did you start?
Oh, what a great question. So whenever I have started a new program, the first thing I like to do is just listen. So the first thing to understand was um, what what is our what can Peloton effectively do? Like where does it make most sense for us to invest our resources? Because Peloton is a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but who are we at the core? So the first thing was to we did this like great listening tour across the organization from all of our retail staff members, our distribution staff, our leadership, our instructors, our most junior team members. We kind of just went around the organization and the ecosystem. We asked our members, what is it that you think Peloton should invest in? And then, we ended up with it makes sense for Peloton as a well-being company to focus on access to physical fitness and mental health. And at the intersection of at that time it was primarily race, but it was, with a lens of equity. So to advance access to health and wellness to populations who experience the greatest disparities in health. So that was step one, was like where's our lane? And I think, I've in the time since I've seen a lot of or a lot of companies who I think do this very well. They have their impact at like at the heart of what they do. So it's tied into who they are as a business rather than kind of like far afield. And then after we established like what do we want to do, then we were like, okay, so like if this is the community that we're trying to serve and this is like how we're trying to invest, well, what exactly do they need? And so we underwent some deep listening. We undertook a human-centered design study in each of the markets where we were seeking to serve with community members that we were trying to reach and just asked like, well, what are the barriers to accessing health and wellness? Like what do communities need? How can a company like Peloton support? And once we identify the barriers, whether it's time or whether it's a safe space to access or whether it's like a community, then only then did we say, okay, we understand who we're seeking to reach, we understand the barriers that they're facing, and then we designed our strategy accordingly. So we invest in physical spaces, we invest in community groups that foster, health and wellness through the power of community. But we basically let the strategy lead us to the organizations who are already doing great work in that space, and then we ask them, you know, what can Peloton do to support the work that you're already doing? How can we help to accelerate your mission together?
What about some of the challenges that you came across when you first joined the company and you're building up that program? Were there any hurdles that you had to overcome, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in those early days, the biggest hurdle I think that we face is that um, Peloton is a place where there's an incredible amount of enthusiasm for impact. I think Peloton is the kind of place that just attracts people who like want to do good in the world and want to make people more well. And so probably my hardest challenge was like corralling all that energy into a strategy. So there would be, in the beginning, it'd be like 4 days out of like 5 work days a week, let's say, where there'd be someone like, I'm going to make this donation to like this random organization that fosters ocean conservation. And it was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like ocean conservation is like, conservation is like critical. And like, I care about it as like a person who lives on the planet. And that is like not aligned with our strategy. So really trying to like establish social impact as a function that is an area of expertise, similar to how like the legal team has an area of expertise around impact and the content team has an area of expertise around creating great content. Like social impact is the function in which expertise sits, and anything that's kind of impact related needs to land on the desk first to make sure that we're like driving the kind of impact that we want. So that was a challenge, was getting everybody on the same page. But once we got on the same page, and I think it probably took about a year or two to really get traction throughout the company. Now, I feel pleased to be like a trusted partner to the business and how to advance impact at scale. And I think it's because we've had such success with what we've done so far. And it's like measurable. We can say like, oh, if you trust Alia to like keep the train on the tracks for a year, you start to see the impact flywheel and then, other parts of the business will come to you.
When it came to getting the entire company on board with the strategy, what was your communication strategy in terms of educating around number one, what is impact, but then number two, where is Peloton putting its energy and why?
That's where that listening tour really came in handy because doing such a like investing that time, and I think it took a couple of months to get around to everybody and to like have everybody be heard and then to like reflect back to them what they heard. So engaging in that listening along the way really helps to invest people in the ultimate outcome and the ultimate kind of like lane that we were seeking to run in. So we did a ton of those listening and like report outs. We would do, I think quarterly, we'd go before the entire company in our all team meeting and say, here is where we've been, here's what we've heard, here's where we're going. And then we finally like launched the strategy. We came back and did a big moment in all team. And so the we would come to different functional so like at Peloton, all the different functions kind of have their town halls. So we would do a road show to all the different town halls and push in and just take 15 minutes and say like, we're the ESG team, like we're the social impact team, here's what we're doing, here's what we've heard from you, here's how it's going to advance our goals. And I mean, that's like a ton of effort to invest, but it ended up paying off on the back end and getting everybody kind of aligned. The I think a mistake that I have learned from is thinking that once you've done that, you're done. But Peloton is also a company that's had like a lot of turnover. We've had like a lot of leadership transition since then. We've had like a lot of team turnover since then. And probably, looking back in year 4, like the strategy was settled, like we were like moving, and I probably forgot to do that as much. And so in this next year, as we advance the next phase of the strategy, which I know we'll talk about later, I have on my like built into my plan to go back and do that kind of active engagement internally just so that people feel brought along the way that they did then.
I'm beginning to realize how important listening tours are because you are now one of probably three or four other practitioners that I've spoken to over the last several months that have said the same thing, how important going on a listening tour actually is. And it's important because number one, a lot of people don't really understand what impact work is all about. They think it's just
No.
volunteering and giving money away. It's so much
Yeah.
more. And so that listening tour is so
It's so
important.
complex.
Exactly.
So nuts. Yeah.
It's so important to educate them. And then to your point earlier, getting them on board with the actual strategy and them understanding the why behind why you're doing what you're doing.
Totally. And I'm not surprised to hear that listening tours are popular or like it's a good engagement strategy because, I as a human, I like to be listened to. I like when if I decide to invest my time in something and to give feedback, I really appreciate having that feedback kind of reflected back to me and being like, here's what I learned, especially about the things that I care about. If it's about something that I don't, if I don't care about, I'm just like, I don't care about that. But if I care enough to invest my time in giving feedback on it, or if it's something that brought me to the company in the first place, like our impact work is, then I feel personally invested in it. And at Peloton, we have a team who's very personally invested in it, which means that it's incumbent upon us as the impact leaders to bring them along on the journey and to understand what they want to see. So that's not just like our team members, that's also like our members. When you lead impact function, you have many, many stakeholders. You've got team members, of course, but you've got the consumers or the people that you're serving. So that's like members, you've got prospective members, you've got the board, you've got like your peers, like all these different people are audiences that matter. And so understanding and educating about what the impact work can do and should do is like a critical component of my job that I had to learn.
Before we move forward, I know not everyone knows what Peloton is and who they are as a company. Most people do, but for those who may not be familiar with the brand, who is Peloton and what is it?
Yeah, so for those who are unfamiliar, Peloton is a global interactive fitness platform that fosters a real sense of belonging and agency around one's personal and community wellness. So we do so through the products that we make. So we have a suite of fitness equipment. Most people are familiar with the bike, but I personally prefer the treadmill, which I use almost every day. And we have a row, we have a couple of other products, we have apparel. And then we also do so through the content that we make. So we have this really strong production arm that basically takes the work of our 54 incredible instructors and helps them create content that makes fitness fun and engaging. And then through those different elements, Peloton's goal is to, just enable better well-being for everyone. So the goal is that every member at Peloton is able to live a life that is long and fit and strong and then happy. And then my work is to ensure that that mission is extended into those communities that have the least access to health and wellness. So it's been a real privilege to get to build impact at a company like this where the product itself is, I think, inherently good for people. And so the the company's values are very aligned with my personal values. And so I get to basically just like extend those values into the world for my work.
Getting back to strategy and you owning the strategy when you first joined Peloton, what lessons did you learn in those early days about building and scaling a program that you can offer other practitioners, especially the ones who are kind of in the same boat as you were back then in terms of just getting into a corporation?
There's two main learnings. One of them is about like the program itself, and then one of it is about like the engagement that we've talked about to keep building the program. So the program itself, like once we know what we're doing, right? Once we've got the mission of the vision for what we're doing, like how we're going to invest our resources, who we're going to invest them in, The first step was just to like make the first round of investments. So like it's not easy work, but like layer one is the grant making. So we started with just, you know, doing grant making to the partner organizations who we'd selected, um, both cash and product where needed. And that was just to prove the model and then to build trust with our community partners and to build the relationship. After the first year or two, every year we started layering in more and more elements, really trying to bring all the assets that Peloton has to bear. So we started to integrate our partners into our content. You know, we'd bring them into the studio for a class, and then the instructor would like have a conversation with them during the class about the work that they do, which reached, our 6 million members. Or we would start to do, we started piloting like in-person community activations, like events basically. And we probably started, I think we had three in 2023. And this last year we had like 43. So we do a lot of these community activations to like meet communities where they are in person. And that was not something that was present in our strategy at first. And so kind of each year we've like built these um, additional elements into it. You know, we do like more product donations. Like we started donating our app. Like we started donating like team member time, like volunteering to help build out a design like a fitness room at Spelman, that for a grant that we gave them. So it's kind of been like start with layer one and then just keep layering in as much as you can on top of that with the relationships. And that's how we that's kind of how we achieved the outcomes that we did. I think at our last measurement, 87.1% of like participants that we touched, and we were able to touch 500,000 people through those various work streams in the first 4 years. 87.1 of them are experiencing like better like wellness and health behaviors as a result of the investments that we've made. So that's like the kind of outcome that we just were like hoping for back in 2020. That's like the program itself. I think on the engagement part, I talked about it a little bit, but with the, I mean, I don't think that Peloton might be an outlier in the volume, but I definitely don't think we're an outlier in the fact of like high turnover at the corporate, in the corporate sector. Like I think the average CEO tenure now is what, like 2 or 3 years? Like it's not very long. So we're getting a lot of turnover. And that means that the kind of, like storytelling that one has to do internally and externally is like a critical part of the job. And often people, when I heard that from other peers, I would think like, well, like once you already have buy-in, like you shouldn't have to convince people to like do the right thing, right? And that's not the kind of buy-in that I'm talking about because people at Peloton are generally bought into impact as a function and like they come here because they want to like increase or effect positive change in the world. But you do have to like tell them what you're doing and how you're doing it and to like make sure that you kind of stay on the same page at all times because impact is so broad and because it's nuanced. Like if you fail to do that level of engagement with not just with the leaders but with the VPs, the directors, like the managers, like both the people who are doing the strategy and the people who are executing the work or who are your partners in the business, then things will start to go left and you'll start to get more and more of those shenanigans landing on your desk. Like, wait, like, what do you mean you want to partner with this organization who's like 100% not aligned with our strategy, but you're the marketing team, so you have like a sizable budget and this is how you want to deploy it. Like that's when you have to start reeling things back in. Whereas if you just proactively communicate along the way, you don't have to do as much of that.
That's such a good point in terms of buy-in. I suspect most people would agree that making an impact, making a difference is a great thing.
Yeah.
And
I
they
mean, I hope so.
yeah, and they love it. But in a business setting, it's a little bit different in that yes, they love it, but you also have to go the extra mile to get them to understand, going back to the whole why we should be doing this. This is a strategy. This and you need to do it over and over again to continue to get that buy-in. It's not just a one and done type of a deal.
No, it's never one and done. It's like ongoing work. And I would say like in the same way where, and this is not like a one-to-one example, but there are other centers of excellence within the building and within like the business that um, should always be tagging their work to the overall company strategy, right? So like if you're on the product team and you're designing like a new feature for the platform, but that feature is like not really aligned with the strategy, like the business is going to view that as like not core work. Or they're gonna be like, well, why is this person spending so much time and resources on this new feature that has nothing to do with our ability to make wellness more accessible to people, right? And so just as with any other function in a business, it all needs to kind of lock together and for the business and purpose, which is why I said that Peloton is a company that's aligned with my own values. I think that's why it's incredibly important to only align yourself with a company that you feel comfortable advancing its business impact as well. Because um, if advancing the success of the business is not something that you feel like passionately about, then there's always going to be kind of a tension between your impact work and the larger business. Whereas like if your social impact work is just one vector of how the business itself is succeeding, then it all is much more harmonious. But if it's at odds with, or if there's tension, then it can be, I've seen it get like tricky to navigate.
Absolutely. And one thing I want to go back to, which I think is really, really brilliant, is bringing partners to the studio, the Peloton studio, because at least in my mind, one of the secret sauces of Peloton is its community. And so being able to bring nonprofit partners to in front of members and tell their story is a really powerful way of using such a powerful mechanism to support organizations Peloton is trying to support.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I hope so that it's useful. Our partners really enjoy it because Peloton has two studios. We have one in New York, we have one in London. It's where we produce all of our tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands at this point, classes. And people think of it as like it's not a gym, like it's not like a cycling class, like it's not like you would go to your local gym and sign up for a cycling class. Like it's a studio production. And I'd say it's more like attending the Tonight Show or SNL, right? Where you go and you have to like register and like the tickets are very, very hard to get into a class at one of the studios. And so be able to curate this unique and special experience for our nonprofit partners or for the communities that they're serving. So, we have had one of our partners in the Bronx has like been partnering with this local running organization that has like young people, running, and we were able to bring them in for a strength class with one of our instructors who's from the Bronx, and like that was a meaningful experience for them. But then also for let's say 30,000 members took that class within the first month of it being on air. That means that 30,000 members from around the world get exposure to this nonprofit and the work that they're doing. So that's one of the like unique, I think, advantages that Peloton has, or like one of the unique assets that we try to figure out creative ways to deploy in support of our partners.
Yeah, it's like amplification on steroids. I love it.
Amplification on steroids. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. It's been really great, and we're always looking for unique ways to support. So like the USO, for example, is one of our longstanding partners who serves like military and veterans. Um, we bring them in usually during Fleet Week, so around Memorial Day, and they get like a special class with Alex Toussaint, he comes from a military family. He went to military academy, so it's a cause that he personally believes in, and so he'll like curate a special experience for them and just thank them for their service. And then, I think the reason why our wider one of the reasons why our wider team is interested in these kinds of things is because it does create for more compelling content. It does a way for us to communicate who we are and what our values are to our members and to the public when we like bring in nonprofit partners like this. And so I think I never have gotten told no when I've asked if I could bring a partner in. It's always just like, yes, like what date do they want to come? So I get a lot of it's a nice thing for many reasons.
Now let's dive a little bit more into what impact at Peloton looks like. Can you talk a little bit more about what the kind of greater impact team looks like in terms of, are you a team of one? Do you have any direct reports? Is there an ESG side of the business as well? What does that look like?
Yeah, so you're catching us at a unique time because I think impact at Peloton looked one way up until August of this year, and then post August it looks pretty different. So our ESG team, which I was hired into, was born on what was then the strategy function. So we reported into the chief strategy officer, and we were one of about 20 people who were on that team. So it was me leading social impact, a colleague leading sustainability, a different colleague leading reporting, and then we had a VP who was overseeing all ESG at Peloton. who like oversaw stewarded the steering committee, which is basically like the lead team, and then also did board engagement. But we all kind of did that together. And that was kind of our strategy. That was kind of like our basic function 4 years. And then each of the functions kind of like built out direct reports. So I think at our largest, we were nine. We're like social impact had a few direct reports, sustainability had a few direct reports, reporting had one. And in this time, the strategy function kind of went away at Peloton. And the person who's the chief strategy officer at the time, his name's Dion. He's amazing. He took on more and more responsibilities. So he took on retail and he took on like commercial and he took on business partnerships and he took on Precor, which is a wholly owned subsidiary. And so it ended up making less and less sense for ESG to sit under that function. At the same time, we got this amazing chief people officer named Alana, who is from Twitter and just like really deeply understands social impact work, I think. And so she felt very passionately about the work. And so she kind of brought us under her fold. And so we sat on people as an ESG function, which I think was really great for social impact. And so that was the journey up until August. And then in August, so our new CEO came in January. He has a like really strong vision for Peloton and he kind of sat for a while and then in August he reshaped the company in a way that he is kind of advancing the strategy as he sees fit.
And with that change, how has that, because obviously 2025 is almost over, how has that, if at all, has the change impacted your strategy from an impact perspective?
Um, I feel fortunate to say that I feel like we've been able to protect the core of our impact work really well through all the different changes. And I think that's partially because the core itself is like very um, tied to who we are as a business. So like the work that I do has always been like you don't have to take a lot of mental leaps to see how Peloton would be advancing access to health and wellness. Like whenever I talk to somebody and they're like, "Oh, like what does Peloton invest in?" I'm like, "You could probably guess." You know, it's like it doesn't take a large leap of imagination. So I think we've been able to protect because of that, and then also because we just had like incredible um support, like making sure we have champions in key areas of the business. So like we're no longer on strategy, but I mean, there's no longer a strategy function, but Dion, who's now what's his role now? Is it chief commercial officer? He's had a couple of titles since then. But Dion, we're no longer on his team, but I still see him as a very senior champion of our work. He cares deeply about place-based work. He's like very interested in how we're advancing access to wellness. Like he's very values aligned. And so even though we don't report to him anymore. He's a champion around the business. And I think that we have our various people around the business who've been able to help protect us. I'd also say that when we have a clear strategy, one of the things that um, I think I and we have been able to do is like just know what's in scope and what's out of scope very quickly. So like knowing what we're trying to advance makes it really easy when inbounds come or like when things come to be like, nope, that's not in scope. Like, nope, we don't do that. Or like, we don't have resources for that because we have to save them for this. And so having a really clear compass has allowed us to protect the work and still advance it, even in a really like dynamic business environment, even through like multiple team restructures and layoffs. Like the work itself has been able to kind of pick up and keep advancing after each restructure because the next step in the work itself is always clear.
How is your, if at all, is your strategy changing in the new year? Is there anything new that you're incorporating into the strategy, or is it more so you already have a pretty solid strategy, so it's more about let's continue the momentum?
I would say I think maybe a combination of both of what you said. So we've just wrapped our the first 4 years of our strategy. As I said, we were kind of like layering in new things as we went along. Um, and now we kind of like know what works and what drives like strong health outcomes. And so something that I'm really excited to advance in the next year is the idea of like place-based donations. So like if we can um, donate our products to places like affordable housing complexes or like senior centers or like under-resourced HBCUs, so basically places where many individuals can have access to a Peloton product. It can also be supported in um, like adopting the product or like adopting the behaviors around health and well-being. And I think that's how we might be able to effect change at scale. And so I'm really excited to start testing that in the next year. Hopefully with some of our existing partners who have helped us with some place-based work in the early days that had some really positive signals in the first 4 years. Um, I also that said, like that's kind of a new element, like leaning into it as deeply. But I do think that I'm always looking for like more. I'm just like more resources, like more grants to organizations who are already doing great work, like more studio activations, like more events, like so not adding new elements outside of really centering on our products, but just really deepening what we've done so far. Because I think we've had a lot of success with that. Like it's very helpful to our partners, like it's meaningful for the communities we're seeking to serve. It like resonates in the business. And so continuing to do those things would be good, I think.
You mentioned resonating within the business, and I would love to get your thoughts on this. One of the topics that I've had conversations with the practitioners for the past year and a half is really figuring out how impact can be better integrated into businesses. Given how everything is unfolding right now with the layoffs and just resources being cut, all that stuff, one of the things that practitioners have been really thinking about is how do we drive business value through our impact work? So it's like, yes, we're doing all the community work, we're making a difference in our communities, but now how can we make a difference within our businesses? I would really like to get your thoughts on how you think about connecting the dots between your work and what Peloton cares about as a business.
So I think I might have a controversial take on this, Jeremy, because I know like the right answer that they would have said in my MBA classes is um tie it to business outcomes like team member engagement or like conversion rates or like the brand halo that you get from doing good work. And I think all of that is true and it's been quantified and you can look up there are like many um business reasons and business metrics that you can tie to impact work. I mean, I think if you use any kind of like AI aggregator and LLM, you can basically just be like, what are some studies that show the connection between like purchasing behavior and like corporate social responsibility? And there are literally hundreds. So like I think that's all true. Right. You do want your team members to feel good about where they work and you do want to retain them and like social impact work is a part of that. And like you do want your purchasers to feel good about who they're purchasing from. And so like social impact work is a part of that. That said, I am me, Aliyah. I am of the belief that it is a business's responsibility to contribute back to the societies in which it functions because as a business, we benefit from the communities that we're serving, we benefit from being in the society that we're in. And so it is just like it is a key function of the business to make sure that we're not taking out more than we put in. So I see being a good corporate actor as just like the right thing to do. Um, and I think that that's why, I keep going back to aligning yourself with a business that you believe in. Like, I want Peloton to win so bad because if Peloton wins, the world is like inherently a better place. Like if people live longer and if they are stronger and if they are healthier and if everyone has access to that, like that is the kind of world that I want to live in. And that's the kind of world that I want my kids to grow up in, right? Because I think I am deeply aware that after COVID, people are just not well. Like people are stressed and like they're anxious. And I see it when I'm driving around and people like honk more and like people are yelling at like people are just like not well. And our communities have lost um some like connective tissue, right? That we're still trying to recover and rebuild. And so if Peloton can be a part of like rebuilding that for people, then I feel really good about that. And it's possible for Peloton to both like make money and be good and to like invest in communities and for that to be a virtuous cycle. So I do believe that there are like many things about social impact that can be tied to direct business metrics, but the KPIs that I'm watching are like, do our partners feel good about us as partners? Like, do they feel like Peloton is being a supportive partner to their mission and not like a typical, I won't say typical, as a maybe more stereotypical corporate actor where they're coming in and kind of like flying in with the big check, taking a picture and flying out. Are we putting as much in as we're asking from our partners? Are we actually driving the kind of like long-term health outcomes that we seek? Are we seeing that 87.1% across the board, across those hundreds of thousands of people? Like that's what I care about. Like that's what I tie my metrics to. And like that's what I report on to the board and to like our senior stakeholders because it is, I think, an understanding that everything, all the business benefits will flow from that. If you do the work well, if you do it in an authentic way, if you do it transparently, then the business benefits will follow. But I know that's like a controversial take because everyone doesn't have the luxury, I think, of being kind of like that far removed from the other business metrics.
I don't know if it's so much as a controversial take as you might think. I do believe, and I 100% agree with you, and I do believe most practitioners believe it's a responsibility of companies to give back. That's why they do the work. That's why they love doing the work. But you have those leadership teams that aren't on the same, you know, in the same ballpark in terms of
Yeah, you
thinking.
don't know how to just control your leadership team either.
Right. And so, for somebody who might have a leadership team that is either skeptical or on the fence, just not fully bought in, what advice would you give that individual in terms of how to communicate with that leadership team to get them to fully buy in?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on where they sit. So if you're like if you're having trouble with, let's say, like your CFO, right? Your CFO is like watching every dollar and she's like really looking at your like LTV to CAC ratio and she's like, well, how is this helping us acquire new customers? Or he or they. Um, I would probably start by tying it to like, well, like if we do well on our, if we do well on particular ESG ratings, like that affects our cost of capital. That affects like how expensive it is for us to borrow or have the cash that we need to operate the business. Or I would say, um, social impact. If you invest in a nonprofit partner, it's a way for you to advance the social impact work at scale, right? Because in order to do the work that our nonprofit partners are doing for, let's say, a six-figure grant, like it would cost you five different staff members here at our company to do the work that we're funding our nonprofit partners to do, right? If you were to pay someone in-house to build the kind of program that our nonprofit partners are already leading with excellence, to bring that kind of expertise in-house, it'd be more expensive. So like extending our impact through partnership is like a more cost efficient way to extend impact. If I were talking to the marketing officer, if the CMO was like not aligned with it, I'd probably talk to them about like the marketing funnel, right? Like there's just like a ton of research that talks about purchaser behavior and consumer behavior and how people want to invest their more and more limited everyday resources and products that are aligned with their values. And when I say aligned with their values, that is people think that there's like a partisan aspect to that, but like a nonpartisan people, everyone across the political spectrum, I'll say here in the United States, thinks it's right and just for people who don't have access to something to get access to it. And so if it's framed as we're helping increase access to this resource that is, currently not distributed equally, everyone loves that, and so like purchasers, especially the further up you get in the funnel, really deeply care about that. And it can help to drive purchase consideration. It can help to drive purchase and sort of helps with conversion rates. If I were talking, I guess it depends on like which function you're talking to, but the principle is to like learn what they care about, learn what problem they're trying to solve. And social impact can actually solve those problems for the business, if done well. It's like it can solve your financial problems, like it can solve your marketing problems, it can solve product, it can solve compelling content. Like no matter what kind of business you are, like social impact done well can be a tool the business uses to solve its problems and to like be more effective and efficient. And also like the purpose of social impact, the first principle is to like it's like the right thing to do.
I feel like most people, other than impact professionals, don't really realize that social impact can actually drive a lot of business value. It's I feel like we need to shout this from the mountaintop because it's
I know.
absolutely
Maybe
true.
when you write your book, Jeremy, I'll be like the person who interviews you on your book tour.
You'll be the first chapter talking about driving business value and communicating with leadership.
No, you'll be the chapter. I'll just be Tracy Ellis Ross to your Michelle Obama.
Now, we talked a little about your career. We talked about Peloton, impact at Peloton, strategy, etc. What I want to do now is switch gears a little bit and take a step back and look at the kind of the entire corporate impact landscape, given everything that's going on right now. So as I mentioned earlier, layoffs are happening, budgets are being cut, resources being constrained, headcount cut, all that stuff. When it comes to integrating social impact into a business, I'd be curious to get your thoughts on, based off of your own experience and what you've seen out there in the field too, what makes social impact, how does one go about integrating it into a business?
I don't I can speak about what I think has been effective at Peloton. I don't know if this is going to be actually no, I feel like this is an effective principle. The business is just people, right? Like in any kind of organization, there are people who are driving the decisions, there are people who are executing on that decisions, there are people who are innovating. And so 80% of the work is just understanding people and understanding what they want. Um, So I think for any impact professional today who's trying to figure out how to integrate their work into the business, I think like question number one to answer is like what is the business trying to do? Right? Like what are we like if you were to distill it down to like a napkin or like a 1 second, like what is the business trying to do? And then understand for yourself, well, how does the social impact work that you're leading support that? And if it doesn't, then maybe you should revisit the work. Like if it's really far afield from like what the business is doing, I think that's like a attention to solve. Um, and then like after you've understood how your work supports like the what the strategy or what the purpose of the business is, because sometimes it's like not even locked into the strategy itself, it's locked into the company purpose, like the company's reason for existing. Then you just, then you go out there and you win friends and you influence people, and then you talk to those people who are leading decisions and you talk to those people who are um executing on them and you say like, I know that you are trying to do X. My goals are X. Those goals are aligned in this way. Like, can we try to like flesh out all of the white space between our mutually aligned goals together? And I think that cultivating those kind of internal partnerships are like critical, especially for most of us have really tiny teams, right? Like I was a function of one for a long time, but we got arguably the most done in that time because I hustled to like make sure that I had relationships with people across the business who also cared about this work and who wanted to and saw how it enhanced their goals. But I think it's like a lot of that. I don't want to say like man defense because that's not the word, but it's like I guess when you're doing impact work, you're playing like both zone and man. It's like you're like trying to cover the whole, like you're talking to the functional head to be like, here's the overall strategy and here's how it supports. But then you're also kind of talking to the more junior team members where you're like, here's like this project that we're working together on to advance our mutual goals. So I would say just like understand the business first and then make sure that your impact strategy is in support of it and then find the areas of overlap between what you're trying to do and what the other functional areas in the business are trying to do.
You mentioned influencing people, building relationships, and then so something I want to go back to really quick is the internal champions. How does one A find the champions and then B kind of cultivate and nurture those relationships?
This is a couple. There's like the structured way to find them, which is that you ask a functional head or after you do those internal town hall presentations, you're just like, so if you're interested in this, like come find me. And often people like if you invite people in, often people will come knock on your door or they'll like send you a Slack or send you an email and be like, hey, I care about this. If I can ever help, like let me know. Or if you're like engaging in a new strategy or you're asking like the chief financial officer, just like who on your team do I work with to like carry this forward? Like who cares about this work? But then the other way is just like an organic um it's like it's organic. So it's when I hear that something is happening that I think like could be a way to enhance our work. So like we have this new marketing campaign that's happening and like it's gonna be in X places or like we're going to be in this place. I go knock on their door and I'm just like, hey, I think that we should work together on this. And then if the collaboration goes well, I'm creating internal champions so that the next time I'm not knocking on their door, they're knocking on mine. And I've seen that happen many, many times across the business where like sometimes it's me being like, we should be working together. Like, I think that this partner would really enhance what you're trying to do for Mental Health Awareness Month or for the F1 series in Las Vegas or whatever. And then the next time it's not me asking them, it's like them being like, hey, like we still work with you 61 Fearless. Like, can we invite them into our marathon programming? Like, we think that they really have something to offer. And so then it creates a lot of pull. But it's the identification of opportunity and like making sure that opportunity goes well so that they become your champions.
How important is relationship building to this work?
Critical. You just can't do without it. You can't do it without having strong relationships within the maybe you can. I just don't know if it's possible. I don't know. I've never seen it be possible to do this work in isolation. Like and honestly, like who would want to do that kind of work in isolation? You know, who wants to be like in their tower, like reading this application and like sending this grant, you know, like that is that's one way to do the work. And I'm sure it's like very fulfilling for some people, but like what's cool about the kind of seat that we sit in as corporate impact professionals is that you do have access to all these different levers for change. You know, we can leverage our content, like we can leverage our products, we can leverage our team. So like the relationships that I have across the business are um like critical, I think. And they enhance the work in a way that I find really cool and interesting and like intellectually engaging. So like those relationships are necessary to do the work in the way that I think is most effective at creating the kind of world that I want to see.
I imagine that it'd be very difficult to create a function that is really sticky within the business without prioritizing relationships and nurturing those relationships.
Yeah. And that, you know, that's just anywhere. It's like the people that I have worked with, I consider friends. Like we have built strong friendships. Even as people have like rolled off the team or come onto the team, like I ask about, they know about my kids. You know, they know my kids are in sixth grade. They know that my son got elected president. You know, they know that like I know who had a baby recently. Like I send flowers to them when they like, you know, and it's just we cannot do this work without each other. And so it's important to me, like those relationships I think are some of the best part about the kind of work that I do is that I get to develop relationships across, you know, our instructors and our chiefs, but also like more our junior coordinators who are like booking classes in the studio. You know, it's a benefit of the job, I think, to have so many friends in the business.
Absolutely. Okay, last question for you. If you had to predict where corporate impact is going to be in the next 5 to 7 years,
Oh, Jeremy.
what would your prediction be?
I was hoping we wouldn't get to this question because I'm just like, who knows? Like, if you were to ask me 5 years ago that we'd be here, like, I don't know that I could have predicted it, but I can tell you what I hope. So corporate impact, I think, is currently in an inflection point. I think there's a lot of pressure on our field right now just because of the socio-political climate in the US and because of I think, the general state of flux that the corporate sector finds itself in. So I think that um, we are under a particular kind of pressure. And I think that's where some people are like maybe pressure testing the value of the work. But I hope that um, creates opportunity. You know, I hope that pressure helps to clarify why the role of why social impact is so important, um, how it can be mutually beneficial to the communities that we're seeking to serve, to the business, to our consumers, to all of our different stakeholders. And I hope that out of this, you know, 5 to 7 years, I hope that we see more companies engaging in the kind of um, impact work that is like true, that is authentic, that is like multifaceted, and that helps to advance um, like a better, more equitable society and like a better business sector. So I hope that that's the outcome. I hope that's what comes from this is like better. And I think it's on those of us who sit in these seats and also our partners across the business to make that happen.
Well, I, for one, share in that hope. Aaliyah, thank you so much for joining me and walking through your career journey and taking us behind the scenes at Peloton.
Jeremy, this has been a pleasure and a joy. Thank you for the conversation, for all the work that you do at Social Impact World. It really is meaningful and impactful. So I appreciate the opportunity.
This episode is brought to you by Social Impact World, the exclusive community for social impact leaders. To learn more, go to www.socialimpactworld.com. I'm Jeremy Brown, and thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Behind the Impact.